Good morning. It's Monday, coming to you live from Dallas, Texas. This is Steve, and again, I'm a behavioral profiler, so I thought I would take a few minutes this morning, well, maybe a little more than a few minutes, and talk a little bit about self-esteem. It's an important subject, and according to our database, close to 70% of clients that we profile have low self-esteem. It can come in various forms. Basically, the profiles can be different. They don't have to look the same to warrant having low self-esteem. But I want to show you what it looks like in some profiles and explain to you, what that means. So let's go to a screen share. I'm having trouble doing this because in my mind I'm thinking about what I'm going to be saying or what I want to do, which stalls my talking to you. So I'm sounding a little bit like I'm zoned out. Oh, hey Daryl, how you doing, buddy? So let's do a screen share here and let me show you a profile and then start detailing some of this for you. All right. Okay, so what I've got here, I whipped this up this morning, to give you a visual. The psychic energy on the right, and a lot of people know this as disc formally. It's formal disc, discology, if you want to call it that. It's a very popular tool. Most people don't know how to use it or how deep it really goes, but there are so many behavioral and emotional facets to this that I want to help do a little bit of a deep dive for you. So we've got two graphs, and most discs come with two graphs. We've got a new one coming out. It'll come out next year, and it won't look anything like this. So it's based on the disc theory, but it won't look like a disc graph. But it'll be probably 3 or 4 times more powerful, and that is our TARP profile. The graphs will look different, everything will look different, but the information it gives you will be profound, to say the least. And this is something this will be research I've been gathering for the last 14 years. Worked into this tool. So it's a big undertaking, and I hope you take advantage of it when it comes out. Okay, so we have two graphs here. We have psychic energy, and we have intended behavior or a solution action profile. What does all that mean? Well, the psychic energy profile, typically graph 2 in a normal disc, what that's measuring is the energy that you as a person rely on in an effort to move forward and do things in the world. Whenever you're going to do anything, I don't care what it is, it's have a conversation, go buy a gallon of milk, it doesn't matter what it is, do your job, maybe you're a law enforcement officer and you're dealing with a very difficult person. What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? And what you do will be based upon the available energies to do anything. In this particular profile, I got an itchy nose, sorry about that. This concealed behavior graph 2 is a core behavioral style. And what I mean by that is we have one emotion that's in play. Now, when I say in play, I mean there's one emotion available for energy. And that would be, in this case, the S, and that's the green line. So the S emotion is patience. It's a patient emotion. So the higher the patience emotion goes, or the more intense the patient emotion goes, then the more we rely on that emotion for doing things in the world. Now, you can be overextended and you can be underextended. And this particular S is overextended, but the D is underextended. Underextended means it's around, I'd say 17, 18 or below. Overextended above 89. And so when you have two extensions, then what happens is we become a danger to either others or ourselves. So when I say danger, don't think you become dangerous. That's not what it means. It means it's what I call a red zone. And in our new profile that will be coming out, it's going to have red zones built in. So you can see if you're in a red zone, and then you'll know what it means, too, because we'll spell it out for you. The anger emotion is the D, standing for dominance, obviously. But the D is very, very low, so underextended, not in play at all. So seeing that the anger emotion is not in play, the emotion for doing becomes absent. And so a person becomes more amiable and they become more agreeable. Okay? So we've got agreeability in this lower dominance position in the brain. And we've got a lot of energy in patience. Now let me explain some things about patience. So it means to be patient, obviously. We kind of know what that means. But it's more than that. The higher or more intense your patience emotion becomes, the less revealed you are in the world. And the reason being is because the patience emotion is derives its energy from a security orientation. And what that means is, out of all the primary emotions, patience is the emotion that we use in an effort to create a secure, safe self. I'm patient because I fear that if I go too fast, something bad will happen. And so patience isn't about a logical desire or a logical decision to show carefulness. It's not that. Patience is about having to be able to predict what's around the corner. If I can't predict what's going to happen next, then I'm not going to position myself to be surprised. All right? So the higher the patience and the lower, hey, Mike, the higher the patience and the lower the anger, the more I want to be in a position of no surprises. And so these are what we call stabilizing people. A stabilizing person, for example, when they get in a canoe, let's say, they're very hesitant, they're holding on a lot, and then when they sit down, they're looking around at all the environment, they're looking at the water, are there any creatures in there? They're holding kind of onto the sides, they got their life jacket on, it's buckled tight. And then as other people start to get into the canoe, their anxiety levels increase as the canoe becomes more destabilized from people, getting into it. And And so there becomes a fear of what's going to happen next. Now, this isn't the fear emotion, that's C in the disc. This is a safety emotion. So is it safe to have all these folks, walking around? So they're thinking, hurry up and sit down because I feel destabilized in this moment. And so that's really what this patient's emotion is all about. It's a fear of destabilization. Now, let me give you a good example of this. Let's say you're a female and you're living in a situation where your partner or your husband is abusive. And so if your anger emotion, your emotion for doing is extremely low, and your patience is extremely intensified, then as long as you can predict the behavior, it's safe, even though you're in a completely unsafe situation. So if you have small children, then this even makes things more difficult because stabilizers are protectors, and so they need someone to protect other than themselves. Okay, so they put more energy into others than they do themselves. And so a stabilizing person will see the little children or the babies as in need of protection, and now they have emotional employment. So they're fully engaged, they're fully employed in protecting the children from the abusive mate. So that gives them this emotional employment, what gives them something to do, and it makes them feel good about themselves because they're protecting the babies. Now, somebody might come along and say, why do you stay in this situation? You're coming up with a black eye every week. You're obviously being abused. And I'm bringing this up because I was at a client site a little while ago, and they said they believe one of their employees is being abused by their husband. And they wanted to know what to do about it. So that got me thinking about this. And so here's what happens. Let's say I say to her, you got to get out of that situation. So that creates a situation of unpredictability. In other words, I can predict my husband getting drunk this week and smacking me around a little bit. But what I can't predict is where I'm going to live with 2 babies and no job. Therefore, the safest situation out of 2 choices is abuse. That's the safest situation. I can maintain emotional employment in protecting the children. I can predict when it's coming, and it becomes, paramount that I actually stay in this situation because it's predictable and I'm emotionally employed in it. Now, you may be listening to this and think that's crazy, but that's how this works. And so what our brain does is it looks for processes and situations that it's familiar with or that work in tandem with the way the brain is wired. So these styles will consistently seek poor circumstances as long as they're highly predictable. Okay. I want to switch over to this graph. Now, this here is a measurement of 7 value elements. Now, we're measuring intensities again, so high and low are intensities, but high and low aren't good and bad. High and low are just high and low. If it's high, it means one thing. If it's lower, it means another thing. I call this the forfeiter, and the reason being is because they forfeit their own position in an act of sacrifice for something or someone else by default. And there's reasons for this. So we have here aesthetic, economic, individualistic, power, altruistic, which is being changed to sacrificial, coming up soon, regulated, and theoretical. Now, I'm not going to go over all these because they're not important for what I'm talking about, but there's 3 lines that are real important here. The economic line is low. Okay, so let's say that's coming in, let's say at a 30. And so a drive to compete with the self is not present. And so there's a yielding in the brain here. You win. I don't have to win. You can win. I don't have to win. And so economic, even though economic might be a little deceiving, it's not really about money. It's about what money does. And it's just one piece to help explain the profile. So people that have let's say if you're a 90 on the economic line, you're likely a workaholic. And what happens is your brain is consistently reaching outside of itself in order to capture or capitalize, hence, quote, capitalism, on opportunities in front of you. So it's a futuristic thinking piece. So when your economic is low, you tend not to think of your future, you think of your present. And so if you're not thinking of your future, you're likely not going to save any money. Because you don't see the future as actually coming. You're sort of disengaged from a futuristic thinking pattern. And I say that because D and I traits, which are active pieces in the profile, they're active emotions, are forward in their thinking and movement. And so they're opportunists. So people that are high on dominance, hey, David, what is that? Are these 7 values correspondent to the intended and concealed grasp you showing before? Yeah. So when a person goes through a profile, we do 2 different things. We do the behavior, which is based on the 4 primary emotions, which is that disc profile, and then we also do your valuistic worldview, which is based upon the 7 dimensions of motivation, which we're looking at right here. And we integrate them. So we integrate each of the 7 with each of the 4 in your other profile. So there's a correlation between these in how you're likely going to do something. So the value set is sort of why you do things, and the behavior set is sort of how you do them, and it's based on the primary emotions. So I hope I answered that, Dave. So less competitive means I'm not thinking of my future, I'm thinking of my current or my past circumstance. And the red and the yellow in the disc, so dominance and influence or inducement, those are active emotions, so they're moving forward in the world. They're going ahead, and they look ahead in the world. I call that large windshield, no rear view mirror. Now, the patience emotion, the S in the disc, does not look ahead. It looks into the past, and it stays in the present. And so the past is golden, whereas the future is daunting. So there isn't any expectations of the future. There's hesitancy concerning the future because I can't predict the future. So active emotions are willing to try and predict the future in an optimistic fashion. Oh, that won't happen to me. You see, they're thinking into the future, and then they're coming up with what they believe is a fact that this isn't going to happen to them because they're taking an optimistic viewpoint. So, oh man, that's so amazing. Okay. I get fascinated by my own thinking. I need to take a drink of coffee. Oh my gosh. All right. What else we see here? Okay, the power value is low. So this is about controlling your world, controlling your circumstances, controlling other people. So this is about your personal space and then your control of that space. So when your controlling factors are lower, then you yield your position to avoid controversy or the unknown, because remember, we need to be able to predict. So we're talking about the stabilizing style. So lower control agency here in this power value says, that's okay, I don't have to do it, or that's okay, it probably wouldn't have worked anyway, or that's okay. So it's this that's okay. It's like, think of the emotion that would be available for believing you can't fight City Hall, so you give up. So when you're uncontrolling in the world, then you are not behind the steering wheel in your car, emotionally speaking. So let's say our life is a car. Where are you in that car? Well, high stabilizing styles with low economic and power factors are never in the front seat. They're either in the back seat or in some cases they're in the trunk of the car. And so they have no influence on where the car goes. I call this the floater. The floater basically in life kind of gets on a raft. They have no sail, they have no paddle, and wherever the current or circumstance takes them, wherever they land, they make the best of it. So I landed in a relationship that's abusive, so I'm going to make the best of that relationship. When they look at the raft for escape, there's no engine, there's no motor. I mean, there's no sail, there's no paddles. So what am I going to do? Well, the brain looks for available energy for fighting, and there isn't any. And so they bob and weave, is what they do. Remember Muhammad Ali, he did this thing called the rope-a-dope, where he just leaned up against the ropes of the ring, and he's a boxer, and he didn't really advance on his competitor. He just, dodged and weaved. It never went anywhere in that position. And his hopes was wearing out the opponent in that particular case. But in emotional cases, they don't see a way forward clearly because all their forward mechanisms in their brain are not in play. What's a forward mechanism? Power is a forward mechanism. Economic is a forward mechanism. Dominance is a forward mechanism. Inducement is a forward mechanism. All four forward mechanisms are out of play. So there is no moving forward. There's only staying put. And that's that in that brain type, it seems the only available option. Now, if you look at this altruistic pattern or think sacrificial, you could see it's very high. It's the highest. Let's say it's an 85 out of 100 or maybe higher. Then this person is only recognizing the value in other people and not recognizing the value in the self. So people that are higher in the economic piece and higher in the power piece, they tend to think, what am I getting out of this? What's next? Is this worth my energy? Like, how much energy am I putting into something versus how much productivity is going to take place and how much am I getting back? And so that's really what that's about. And then, of course, in the controlling piece, in control, out of control, under control, the three controlling spaces, where are they here? Well, if you're low on power, you're not in control, that's for sure. Somebody else is. You may not even be under control. It doesn't necessarily mean you're out of control. It just means you're out of the controlling seat. Out of control, people think is crazy. But that's not what that means. It means you're not in a position to control whether it's your emotions or anybody else's. And therefore, you're out of the controlling seat. So economic and altruistic, or economic and sacrificial, are opposites. They're opposites. Okay? So the fact that you have this person has low economic, high altruistic, then you can take that altruistic or that sacrificial piece and times it by 2. Because a low economic standing is a high altruistic standing or a self-sacrificial position. So you get 2 positions of sacrifice. Low economic is a position of personal sacrifice. High altruistic is a position of personal sacrifice. So now you've got 2 of them. 2. And what that means is there are no alternatives to sacrificing your own wants, needs, and desires in your brain. There aren't any. It's your only option. And so the ability to see more value in other people has nothing to do with their value. We're getting ready for the punchline here. It has everything to do with your lack of value. Okay? So this is what tricks everybody. People that are highly altruistically driven or highly sacrificial, people see that and they think, oh, they're so amazing. And that is amazing. I'll grant you that. But what they don't realize is they don't have any options. Not everyone, but some of these people do this because they don't have any options in their brain. Like the only option is you and not me. Now, the bigger question is why? Why not you? You see, that's the bigger question. And so if you are experiencing this, you've got to stop and think for a minute. And to think, you have to get out of your limbic system. You've got to get out of your limbic system and into your conscious, rational mind. Now, that's not easy to do. You have to step back and step outside of yourself and ask yourself in third person, Steve, why are you constantly giving up your positional space in the world to somebody else? Why is that, and how often do you do it? If that becomes excessive, then there's an issue. And that's the issue we're addressing here. And so having a high patience piece when it's overextended, then there are overblown security concerns. Typically, I mean typically, usually, this is a result of not feeling safe when you're younger. Or I would say anywhere between age 0 and maybe 15, unpredictable patterns were taking place, which can stem from moving around a lot, let's say. I had a client one time who was a 98 on patience and under 10 on dominance, and I asked them, tell me about the first 15 years or so and what that was like for you. And they said, I was in 11 different high schools. 11 different high schools. Okay, so that's trauma, all right? And so now that they're coming up on age 60, they have 2 speeds, slower and stop. And the reason being is because the highly unpredictably charged atmospheres being young, every time I try to put roots down, I get uprooted. So now that they are in a position to make their own decisions in the world, they put their roots so deep, you can't uproot them at all. And so things that they want to do take so long to do them, it goes past the opportunity schedule. In other words, every time we do something, you have these opportunity schedules where at some point, if you do this, if you act quicker, then you're likely to get a better result. If you take too long, the opportunity passes you by. And so moving forward in the world becomes extremely, instead of slow and slower, some people are slower and stop, which is even more so. And so having, that was an answer to your question, David. And so it becomes increasingly difficult to reach milestones and desires and dreams and visions of your future, because the future is so daunting. It's like trying to push a car up a hill. It's really, 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 really hard. So some people need assistance. And so nothing wrong with that. If I got to push my car uphill, I have no problem asking for help to do that. I don't feel like I'm weak to do that. It's a hard job to do. Everybody realizes that. But you have to give yourself the same kind of thinking when it comes to how your mind works. And for some reason, nobody has a problem wearing crutches, having a broken leg, and saying, listen, it's going to be hard for me to do that. I'm in a cast. I was in Canada last week, and one of my clients broke their foot and was in a cast. So I had no problem waiting for them to get up the stairs. I wasn't like, hurry up, what's wrong with you? But you know, when it comes to the brain, like all of a sudden, we change the way we feel about when something isn't working to its optimum in a situation. I mean, I don't expect to see people in casts, running foot races. So why do we expect to see people that have a very passive / non-controlling competitive mindset? Why do we look at them and say, hurry up, what's wrong with you? Like, why do we do that? And so you have to look at the brain like you look at a leg or a foot. It's a part of the human body that has a capacity for either moving faster, slower, or whatever. Nobody puts a moped in a motorcycle race. And if you did put a moped in a motorcycle race, everybody would know why you didn't win that race. But yet when it comes to the brain and we put him in a work situation, we're all like, I don't know what's wrong with Bob. I don't know why he can't keep up. How about Bob's brain is a moped and your brain is a dragster? And this is what we have to help companies understand. So we look for the mopeds, we look for the dragsters, we look for the funny cars, we look for, name it. I mean, there's all different kinds of people out there, and we put them in the right race, and now they win. And so we don't want to look at the brain type and say that's a bad brain type. We don't look at the moped and say that's a very bad instrument for use. No, it's great for zipping around your neighborhood, around your little town, going to the grocery store to pick something up. If you got a basket on it, it can be fun. But, you don't take that out on I-75. Nobody does, and no one expects that to happen. And when they do see it happen, they're going to call the police. So why don't we do this when it comes to people? All right, back to the forfeiter. So I'm just going to do a few more minutes here. Lower economic drives, lower power drives, and higher sacrificial elements in the brain create a you first, me last perspective of the world. In other words, maybe, I'm not worthy. So a good example would be, let's say you planned on going fishing Saturday morning, and it's been a long trip. You've been planning it a long time. And it's just local. You're not going out of state, or you don't have hotel reservations or anything like that. You were just going to get up early and go fishing because you had some time off. And let's say a really good friend calls, really upset because they needed some help on Saturday and their help fell through. They don't have any help now. It's super important. They don't know who to call. Blah, blah, blah. The forfeiter will forfeit the fishing trip in an effort to help the other person without even giving it a second thought. So imagine having this forfeited mindset and then thinking, I'm sorry I can't help you, I already have plans. Now, if you were signed up and paid money and had a hotel reservation, an airline ticket, and blah, 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 and you were going somewhere, then it would be easier to say, I can't help you because, you're going to lose $1,100. Or whatever. Like, okay, that we can understand that better. But if you don't have anything else going on and you were just going to go fishing just to give yourself some personal time, then when you compare your personal time to another person's personal time, your personal time ain't worth anything. You see, this is what happens. And so you end up always forfeiting your own ambitions, your own dreams, your own desires in an effort to meet the dreams, the ambitions, and the desires of other people. And so don't think for 1 minute people aren't catching on to this. So we all know that person, when we say, oh, just call so-and-so, they'll do it, or they'll help you. Because we know there's a pattern there. So what I want to encourage you to do and to understand is this. That ain't a good pattern. You have to balance your time for self and others, and don't get out of balance on it, because when you do, it's a problem. And the problem may not be readily seen at first, but it will be seen later. So self-esteem is an intrinsic valuing of the self. In other words, it's an understanding and a clear view of your own personal uniqueness, value, qualities in an intrinsic sense. When you can't really see the value in yourself, or when you look at yourself, you have negative feelings about yourself, then what happens is we put our energy into maybe what we do, because there's not a whole lot of energy in who we are. Or we will put our energy into who we're going to become, like who I believe I'm going to become in the future versus who I already am. So that's called self-direction. So if your self-direction is excessive, then your whole life is a race to become better than you are right now. Problem is, you can't get better than you are right now. You can't become a better person. You may be better at doing something like changing a tire or crocheting or solving math equations. You can get better through training, teaching, learning, so forth. But you're never a better person, because who you are is separate from what you do. But most people don't see it that way. They say what they do as an extension from who they are, and it's not true. And so you have to break those apart into their separate entities and see them for real. It's like your IQ. If it's 102 at age 7, it's usually about 102 at age 77. So the IQ really doesn't change a whole lot. Even though you now have a master's degree, you're not smarter, you're more informed. In other words, you have more information about a subject, but you're not smarter. So you still may not be able to access that information in a way that's very positive for yourself, even though you know a lot. So we all know that smart person who does stupid things. And so it's weird how that works. And so to the ability to apply what you know, to apply that information, is more of an IQ situation, and sometimes even an EQ situation when it comes to other people. But knowing that information, everybody has a different capacity for knowing, but everybody has a differing level of being. So a human being is one thing, a human doing is another thing. So what we do is separate than who we are. If your human being is off, everything is off. And that's the point I want to make. If your human being is off, everything is off. And so you have to get yourself positioned in who you are and be comfortable with it, and not compare yourself to other people, because when it comes to the empathetic piece in human beings, we can't look at other people and compare them to things or other people. We can compare what they know, but you can't compare who they are, because all people have equal value. And this, we find this foundation in religious perspectives. In the Judeo-Christian framework, I knew you the day before you were born, blah, blah, blah. I set you apart in your mother's womb, these kind of references where you were special then, you're special now. And this is a big reason as to why religions are so successful, is because we have this external entity telling us, who's allegedly all-knowing, telling us how amazing we are, and we hold on to that for dear life. Because without that, you're not amazing at all. And what fuels that is some religions will tell you you aren't amazing unless you believe this. And then your amazingness, really matters for you. Like God thinks you're amazing, so you need to align yourself with what he thinks of you, so to speak, that kind of thing. But if you don't believe, let's say, in God, then your amazingness really isn't going to get you anywhere. And so that, theological framework works really well for securing large groups of people who don't feel good about themselves. It just works really well. I think the statistic is, about 84% of people that come to faith come through personal crisis. It's all caving in, it's all bad, so I need a knot in my rope. And so here's one that's really big, and you can wrap your arms around it and sit on it like a tire swing. And then until I get my bearings, I'll do that. So I want to get off of that. I'm just saying, we're in a world where low self-image and low self-esteem is easy to come by. And I just want to encourage you to think of yourself in perspective, in a perspective that's right. You have value. Everybody has equal amounts of earning power, but in different arenas. Don't look at yourself and look for, quote, negatives and positives. Just understand that there's a lot of positive things about you. You have to land on those and then look for a way to get into or create a circumstance that allows those positives to flourish. And that's the goal. So there's certain things about me that, aren't very positive. Like, I'm terrible at spelling. I'm terrible at math. I have certain kinds of fears. Like, this is just my brain. And so what do? Well, I put myself in a situation where I'm not having to do math all day. Or I put myself in a situation where I can capitalize on the things that are really positive about myself, and then create a world around that allows me to function in there and do very well, simply because I'm basing what I do on who I am and all the positive traits about me. And that opens up and allows for far more productivity, less thinking, and more success. All right, I don't know what else to say, so I'm going to end it there. Let me get back to the full screen here. So I hope that was helpful. I know the beginning of this was pretty raw. I was stumbling around with my words, trying to get my slides up and right, and it got all weird. So take a look. I really hope you share these, because I'd like to get the word out. I've been hunkered in this bunker for many years, and I'm trying to, get out there, get the information out there. There's a lot of people to help out there. So anyway, have yourself an awesome week this week. And look for your strengths, and try to capitalize on those. Hey, Dave, you're welcome. I'm glad you were able to chime in. Have a great week, buddy, and everybody else have a great week. Talk later.